Imagine there's an alien military hegemon that has overtaken much of the world. It directly occupies a single continent where it eradicated many of its previous inhabitants and built a society on blood, shackles, and ashes. Within its borders, people go to work, consume entertainment, and argue about politics while being surveilled, disciplined, divided, and managed through a dense hierarchical order. Though even as they suffer, the subjects themselves are brainwashed by the hegemon's propaganda and bought by the benefits of its international exploits. Some may resent the system, but all endure it. Beyond the borders of its most immediate occupation, the armies and bases of this alien hegemon are spread across the planet. It faces little challenge to its military capacity, intervening and invading wherever it wishes. It dictates economic policy through its control over the world's financial system. Its voice alone determines the rules that do or do not apply, and the biosphere carries the costs. These alien rulers may look like you and me, but their humanity is only a useful facade to extract the cooperation of their human subjects. Across factories, farms, offices, schools, and prisons, both within their territory and beyond, the alien rulers rely on their human collaborators to maintain their order. Police, soldiers, bureaucrats, down to even the workers themselves. The hegemon is not all-powerful. It has lost before, but it presents an image that defies challenge, inside and outside its territory. The inertia of its order is so powerful that even as conditions worsen for the majority, they still fail to challenge its foundations. Instead, their frustrations fall upon scapegoats and conspiracies, or they have simply accepted defeat. There are few true challengers to the alien order. Hope appears to be out of the question. Thankfully, the sci-fi scenario I'm describing has no resemblance to reality whatsoever. Still, as a thought experiment, putting ourselves in the shoes of those subject to such a state of affairs, how might we resist this alien invasion? When an authority appears to outman and outgun all resistance, one of the approaches that historical rebels have turned to is insurgency. But you might be wondering why this approach is seen as appropriate. Why not attempt reform, or just withdraw from the system? The alien order is a totalizing system of economic, military, and ideological prowess. Reform presumes that there is something worth preserving within the system, and that the system is capable of self-correction. It presumes that the ruling class cares for moral appeals, although nobody in the world, nobody in history, has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who are oppressing them. And attempts at withdrawal presume that spaces of autonomy will be sufficient, tolerated, or allowed to thrive. But these conditions do not exist under occupation. Insurgency, broadly understood, is organized, armed rebellion carried out against a more powerful authority by relying on popular support and using asymmetric tactics like guerrilla warfare for the sake of accomplishing political goals, like independence or regime change. Insurgency is not exclusively violent, but it refuses to meet domination on the losing terms set by the dominant power. This doesn't make insurgency inherently virtuous, nor does it guarantee success, but it explains why insurgency is the path of resistance often taken when all else is foreclosed. Despite being outmatched militarily, there are 7 unique advantages to insurgency. Insurgents are far more mobile than conventional militaries. They're not bound to a static territory that can be easily targeted. Insurgency is often factionally diverse, made up of shifting and situational alliances between autonomous groups. Since insurgents don't aim to take and permanently hold territory, they're far more unpredictable compared to conventional armies. Insurgents tend to take the initiative when it comes to their battles, deciding when and where they fight to maximize their advantage, to inflict losses without incurring them. Surprise is a major advantage when insurgents go on the offensive, but defense is just as vital, hence the importance of camouflage. And camouflage is best accomplished when insurgents have civilian sympathy, which also brings the intelligence, resources, shelter, and legitimacy that keeps insurgencies alive. Insurgents may be nationalist, religious, left-wing, or right-wing. Some insurgents aim to strike fear, others hope to inspire sympathy. Some insurgents may be organized as networked yet autonomous cells, others are more heavily regimented. Some insurgents are demonized, other times they are romanticized. though it all depends on who you ask. I think neither approach is helpful if our goal is to understand them. Across vastly different contexts, from China to Indonesia to Cuba to Brazil, insurgent theorists arrived at similar conclusions regarding the fundamentals of guerrilla struggle. Mao Zedong, Abdul Nasution, Che Guevara, and Carlos Marighella each made internationally renowned contributions to the subject of guerrilla warfare. Though I'm neither a Marxist-Leninist nor a nationalist, their work is still worth examining critically. All four agree that armed action should serve a political struggle. All four insist that guerrillas must be rooted into population and maintain popular support, without which they are mere bandits. Each author stresses the value of flexibility, surprise, and the wise use of terrain and time. But the actual role of guerrilla warfare was seen slightly differently between these thinkers, due to their unique contexts. Nasution and Mao both saw guerrilla warfare as an integrated element in a broader military strategy that included conventional warfare. Guevara saw guerrilla warfare as a stage that would lead to conventional warfare. He also granted guerrillas a catalytic role in the struggle, arguing that rather than waiting for the conditions to be right, guerrilla warfare with popular support could create the conditions for revolution. He pursued this by pairing military action with political education, and Marighella saw guerrilla action as the best long-term strategy for weakening the military dictatorship he lived under in Brazil and shaping conditions toward mass revolution. Nasution and Mao succeeded in their aims. Guevara both succeeded in Cuba and failed in Congo and Bolivia over the course of his life. Marighella's efforts were crushed by the military dictatorship, which endured for 16 years after his assassination. Even so, it's difficult to determine when and where insurgencies and guerrilla tactics will succeed, because conditions always vary considerably. These men all fought at different moments in history, in different parts of the world, while dealing with different resources, navigating different geographies, and being immersed in different cultural contexts. Since their time, governments have only gotten better at surveillance, containment, and counterinsurgency. Remember, the scenario I've created is not the Cold War era 20th century, it's the present day. The rise of drone warfare alone has significantly transformed the combat terrain. You can't expect to copy the same forms in dissimilar conditions and expect the same results. And do we even want the same results? The shape of the struggle to overthrow an alien occupation will depend on whether your radical ambitions end at replacing their rule with another government or creating the conditions that make government entirely obsolete. The former goal, which comes with its own complications and pitfalls, is still certainly much easier to achieve than the latter. Anarchists would know a thing or two about the difficulty of actually achieving the idea, but the failure to achieve anarchy or win particular military moments does not eternally doom the project to the dustbins of history. It took many attempts before humans achieved flight, let alone put a man on the moon. Capitalism, like feudalism before it, was not established in one fell swoop. Many of the things that are so ubiquitous now, whether technological or political, were barely a thought generations ago. Anarchists are not resigned to what already exists. The goal, as radicals, is to transform society into something completely new. Sure, inspiration may be drawn from moments in the past, but the options are not limited to what has already existed. But I digress. Let's go back to how insurgencies could organize against this hypothetical alien occupation. What are some of the things that the resistance will need to consider? Any movement that wants to fight to win will have to let go of the mindset that defeat is inevitable. Resistance is not futile. Before any physical terrain can be taken, the psychological terrain must be reclaimed. People have to break free from the ideological conditioning of capitalism, statism, patriarchy, and all the other packages of propaganda that legitimize the alien occupation and its tendrils of control as natural and eternal. And while reclaiming that psychological terrain, the movement will necessarily reclaim the social terrain, as people share their analysis of the problems, build trust in each other, develop adaptable organizations, and work together to find solutions. Networks of hardened revolutionaries capable of launching insurgency don't emerge overnight. They're cultivated slowly, through joint problem-solving projects, martial and survival skill exchanges, and education drives that expand the abilities and strengthen the resolve of those involved to seek their freedom. Insurgents must learn how to avoid capture, free captives, collect intelligence, establish blockades, sabotage alien capital, engage in battles, and communicate covertly. They must develop endurance to remain a problem for power in the long term. If these insurgents are of an anarchist persuasion, they'll need to understand the distinction between leadership and authority and between solidarity and obedience, as I've already explored on this channel, to avoid reproducing the very system they're aiming to fight. Any serious challenge to such an entrenched order must assume repression, carried out by the maintenance staff of the alien occupation. This is people getting slammed on the ground, thrown into prisons, maimed by bludgeons, or killed by bullets. It's not enough to simply carve out a space of greater relative freedom from the pressures of the system. One cannot merely retreat to personal healing or community charity, as neither confront the occupation head-on, but overextending the movement, acting prematurely and beyond capacity, is a form of adventurism also doomed to failure. One must simply evaluate the situation with clear eyes. Any confrontation or resistance will be met with resistance. Movements must be prepared. The people might need to form militias, organized by common trust and affinity, to defend their communities and fight back using some combination of collectively and self-determined tactics, strategies, and goals. Tactics are the menu of specific actions and methods used to achieve goals. Goals, which can be short-term or long-term, are the defined outcomes to be achieved, so there isn't mere action for acting's sake. Strategies are the broader plans that set direction and priorities, and coordinate those actions over time. What degree of coordination between groups is necessary to achieve their shared goals? How much visibility, and correspondingly how much risk, are they willing to take on? How do they balance the benefits of an extended struggle in wearing down the enemy, without facing the drawbacks of long-term exhaustion? These are questions any insurgency must grapple with. But to get the complete picture of how insurgencies must organize, we have to look at how the enemy will organize in response. That's where studying counterinsurgency comes in. Counterinsurgency is any militaristic, propagandistic, economic, or political action taken against the activities of insurgents. Counterinsurgency often relies on the framing of its enemies, the insurgents, as criminals or terrorists or something inhuman. People are accustomed to justifying all manner of abuse against those they deem the bad guys, and insurgents will face similar portrayals. Thus, full military force can be deployed under the guise of keeping the peace, whether within the aliens' borders or outside of them. With few exceptions in the form of dissent, desertion, treason, or defection, the military mostly carries out its repressive duties. They do what they are told with the full backing of their government and often their public. There are many models and approaches to insurgency. We'll just look at two. Counterinsurgency expert David Kilcullen developed the 3 pillars model of counterinsurgency. That framework defines the conflict as a system of insurgents, counterinsurgents, and the population, further divided into those committed to the insurgents, those committed to the counterinsurgents, and those who just want to live their lives. The core idea of the 3 pillars model is that lasting control over the conflict environment will depend on what progress is made across the pillars of security, politics, and economics. At the base of all 3 of the pillars is information, intelligence, analysis, and communication. Every security, political, or economic action sends a message, so the information effort is about unifying that message. Security actions serve to both defeat the insurgents and police the population. Political actions seek to influence the perception and legitimacy of governance so that insurgents hemorrhage support. Economic actions try to bring populations on the side of the counterinsurgency by strengthening the state's infrastructure and management of its resources. In theory, these 3 pillars can establish the overall aim of restoring control. Another popular counterinsurgency theorist is David Guerrilla, a French military officer who traveled or fought in China, Greece, the Philippines, and Algeria. In 1964, he wrote Counterinsurgency Warfare, Theory and Practice, a manual of counterinsurgency that is still referenced today. Guerrilla described 4 laws of counterinsurgency. First, the support of the population is paramount. The general population makes or breaks the efforts of insurgencies and counterinsurgencies alike, so both forces must work in the arena of propaganda. Second law, the support of the people is obtained from an active minority. You don't actually need to win everybody. You just need those that you've won over to your side to drown out everyone else. Whoever is pro-alien occupation needs to be amplified. The third law is that the support of the population is conditional. Counterinsurgencies can lose popular support if they act in ways that people don't like. Again, it comes down to perception. The fourth and final law is about the intensity of effort and vastness of means. The counterinsurgency cannot fight everywhere all at once. The insurgents are typically far more mobile than their enemies, so that enemy must focus their efforts, resources, and personnel on particular areas rather than the whole region of insurgency. Now, if it was up to Guerrilla alone, counterinsurgencies would stamp out the insurgents by any means necessary. But he recognizes that what he deems necessary will be viewed as excessive and thus lose popular support, particularly when the threat of insurgency is cold, meaning legal and non-violent. However, when insurgencies become openly illegal and violent, that justifies turning up the heat and acting decisively without that pesky moral fog. Even then, Guerrilla advises restrained action on the part of counterinsurgency efforts in order to retain support. He places the focus on arresting and assassinating insurgent leaders, which can be made less effective if an insurgency is leaderless. Counterinsurgency may attempt to infiltrate the insurgent movement and turn it against itself, which can be easier or harder depending on how it's structured. Guerrilla recommends addressing the grievances that legitimize the insurgency through political reform, but only to a point, as some insurgents make demands that are impossible to co-opt without compromising the authority of the state. Ultimately, Guerrilla's main drive behind counterinsurgency is getting the populace to accept the regime, whereas insurgents will always seek to undermine that acceptance in the populace. And as even he admits, as long as the revolutionary situation exists, even in a dormant form, as long as the problem that gave rise to the insurgency has not been eliminated, the danger persists. The problems that gave rise to an anti-occupation insurgency will not be resolved unless the occupation is ended. At what point should an insurgent movement move from guerrilla warfare to territorial claim? What are the ambitions of such a movement beyond the end of occupation? How can they prepare for that end? What constitutes victory? What is beyond insurgency? It's a lot to take in all at once. These are questions the insurgents will need to answer for themselves. Insurgents may need to fight for their freedom, yes, but warfare scars all. There's nothing about it worth romanticizing. And those scars may leave an impression on the culture long after the end of the occupation that is counter to safety, trust, and well-being. Look at the history of colonization to see how habits, ideas, and structures have persisted long after the colonizers officially left. Insurgents may need to be warriors, but can they avoid imposing a warrior culture on the whole of society? Can they cultivate a culture that is trained to defend itself, knowledgeable in the practice of conflict, and capable of fighting back without succumbing to a glorification of leaders and battle? The movement will need to counteract these influences with, in the words of an anonymous anarchist, the wisdom of the elders, the spontaneity, playfulness, and brutal honesty of the children, and the careful chiding and questioning of the pacifists. What do you think you'd do under alien occupation? And what would you refuse to become? Let me know in the comments below. All power to all the people. Peace. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with fellow peoples. Thanks to the seedlings, the saplings, and especially the roots for making all of this possible, including our newest members, Donovan, CD, Jake, and Cabaway. You can join these beautiful humans and support me too on patreon.com/sametrue. Check out my other videos for a range of radical topics. Thanks again. Peace.